Welcome back to the Sports Whip. I'm Kory Keys, joined by Alex Lake, Ashley Barnett, and David Henson. Now we're going to preview this week in the SEC. There were a few interesting games this past week that we talked about. Now there's some more this coming week. We start things off with Florida and Alabama. Obviously, this was the game last year that was the SEC championship game where Tim Tebow's famous tears rained down in Atlanta. And it's a whole new ball game now. Florida's young. They don't have Tebow. They're without a couple other key players. Alabama has still gotten it done. They win against Arkansas. Tell me what's going to go on there and who has to play well?
Well, let's remember, I believe from last year's SEC championship team, this Florida team is going to be completely different. So, they don't, as far as they're concerned, they don't really know anything about last year. So, right now, I really think Florida could go into Alabama and win. Obviously, Alabama had a very emotional win last week against Arkansas, and I think it's very possible that Florida goes into Tuscaloosa and pulls out a victory.
I love the Florida-Alabama game. They're such huge rivals. Every year it's interesting. It's something new. And this year, Bama is still going strong. I mean, they haven't lost a game yet. Their offense is so good. They got Greg McElroy, Mark Ingram, and now they have Trent Richardson, who is just as good, as not better, as Mark Ingram. Now, for Florida's defense, they're going to have to stop. They're going to have to stop Greg McElroy and all these running backs. But the thing is with Florida's offense is that they have multiple running backs that, confuse any defense. So, Alabama and Florida, it's going to be a close game.
I think it's going to be a really good game. The big thing for Alabama is stop Trey Burton. He came out last week, the freshman. He scored 6 touchdowns, broke Tim Tebow's record already for most touchdowns in a game. So that's someone that Alabama is really going to have to look at coming from quarterback, from receiver, running back. He can play everything, kind of like a McCluster type player. So that's something they have to look at. And for Alabama, you're going to get the ball. They're going to be giving the ball to Ingram. After 2 games, ESPN already has him at the top of the Heisman Trophy prediction race or whatnot. So if they can do that, it's going to be interesting to see how McElroy after.
And let's remember, it's going to be the 2 best coaching staffs, arguably, in the SEC going head-to-head, which is going to make the game all the more interesting.
Well, you can't forget Trey Burton's 6 touchdowns was the first player to do that since Cadillac Williams for Auburn did that in 2003. And this is a kid who was doing it as a Wildcat quarterback last week against Kentucky, which really last week we thought Kentucky was going to give him a game. And even I think you said that Kentucky was going to win games that they weren't supposed to this season. And we thought it was going to be Florida, but Florida hangs 42 points on them. Kind of impressive by the Gators. Now we go over to Tennessee and LSU in Baton Rouge. Tennessee, UAB, they win in overtime. The receiver is carried off the field for Tennessee following this win, something that you don't see every day, and that's the state of Tennessee football right now. LSU keeps getting things going. They beat West Virginia. They're undefeated, and nobody's going to talk about them in the West.
Exactly. LSU, every week we talk about it, no one's talking about them, but they're undefeated, beat a top 25 team. And to kind of talk about LSU football, they had a top 25 game, a night game against West Virginia at home, wasn't sold out. There were still empty seats at the top of the stadium. So there's some problems with LSU right now. It's kind of interesting there. Tennessee, 1 week they're leading Oregon and then losing big, and then the next week they're playing close with Florida, and then they barely beat UAB in double overtime. It's kind of which Tennessee team will show up. They're so young, but they're starting to get their feet wet a little bit. I think this could be an interesting game, but I don't see LSU losing.
I mean, Tennessee, their defense has been looking pretty rough so far. I mean, they almost lost to UAB in double overtime, and then with LSU, Jefferson. I feel like with each year he always has a slow start, but he manages to improve and get better.
Yeah, Jefferson looked actually a lot better than I thought he would last weekend against West Virginia. And then LSU's defense, that's something that no one's really been talking about. But right now, this is the number 1 SEC defense right now. And obviously, if you're the best defense in the SEC, you're right up there in the country. So that's something that not a lot of people have really thought about with LSU.
And Tennessee's offense is really going to struggle because Denarius Moore has been their offense,
right,
and passing the ball with Sims as the young quarterback. He's going to be going against Patrick Peterson. That's not going to go well for them. So Tennessee's going to be shut down on the passing game. It's going to come down to the rushing game.
Next, we have a game with 2 embattled head coaches. Mark Richt of Georgia going to Colorado. Dan Hawkins. This game's in Boulder. The way Colorado played last season, you wouldn't think this should be a game for a second. But the way Georgia's played this year, it kind of puts things on a level playing field. This is the last year that Colorado is in the Big 12. They're going to get a chance. A win like this could keep Dan Hawkins around for another year. But talk about Mark Richt and his job security right now, especially with Georgia's struggles.
Yeah, and supposedly there was a rumor out this week that Georgia AD has been talking to Dan Mullen at Mississippi State. Now, obviously, that's most likely not true, but this is going to be AJ Green's first game back for Georgia, and I really don't think this is going to be much of a game. I really think Georgia's going to go into Colorado, and really it's not going to be much of a game. That's just my opinion, obviously.
I agree. AJ Green is back. That's going to be huge for Georgia's offense because their offense has not been doing well. I mean, they lost to Mississippi State last weekend. And I think AJ will definitely bring up a lot of opportunities for their running game.
You could tell something was missing last week without AJ Green on the field when Andy Murray was playing against Mississippi State.
Exactly. Anytime you have a freshman quarterback and you lose your go-to receiver and probably is the best receiver in the nation this year, it's going to hurt. You're going to have your growing pains. But Georgia just hasn't looked good, and I keep on expecting every week with Wayshawn Ely and every week you expect them to start going, and they're 1-3. They haven't gotten it going. Now it's going to be interesting. AJ Green will improve them. It's going to be tough to go to Colorado, and I could kind of see Colorado pulling the upset.
Now last game we're talking about this week is Kentucky at Ole Miss, an 11:20 start from Vaught-Hemingway Stadium in Oxford. 3-1 Kentucky against 2-2 Ole Miss. This is a game that both teams need to get an SEC win. We've talked about Ole Miss, but with Kentucky, what do the people need to know? I'm sure everybody knows about Randall Cobb, but is it strictly the Randall Cobb show?
It's the Randall Cobb show. That's all you can say. So Randall Cobb, it's like Trey Burton for Florida. He's going to be at Wildcat. He's going to be receiver, running back, returning punts, kicks, everything. He's going to be their offense. Last week against Florida, they shut him down, and you saw what happened. So it's going to be up to Ole Miss to shut down Randall Cobb, which is something they've really struggled with. Quarterbacks in motion and stuff. So it's going to be interesting if they can do that. Kentucky lost Trevard Lindley. So if Ole Miss can get a running game going plus a passing game, I think they should be okay.
Ole Miss defense has to stop Cobb. Cobb is their offense. He's their running back, their wide receiver, their quarterback. He's their greatest player. And our defense Ole Miss defense has to stay together. They can't crumble apart.
But Kentucky also has a running back, Derek Locke, who also who's averaging 118 yards.
And we haven't even talked about Mike Hartline at quarterback.
Right, exactly. I mean, they obviously have more weapons than just Randall Cobb, and a guy like Derek Locke that's been averaging 120 yards, per matchup. It's going to be a tough test for an Ole Miss defensive line that's going to be without Kentrell Lockett.
All right, when we come back, we're going to look around the nation at a few key games, and we'll even go into Ole Miss basketball recruiting. Stay tuned to the Sports Whip on Ole Miss TV.